How's that for an intro?
I jump in here and I hear that. How's that for an intro? So now I'm scared.
Oh, I slid in like Dukes of Hazzard style.
Ooh.
You know? Just a good old boys.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by Mr. August from my Tech Founders Pit-Up Calendar, Rich Swire. How we doing today, man?
I don't even know what that is, but that's I've got this idea. This great, not to sidetrack the pod, but
let's just dive right into that.
My son and I came up with this idea for a calendar. Now that you mentioned calendars,
okay,
and it's called the Buddhist calendar, and it's literally as you flip page to page, it just says today on every.
Yeah,
yeah, it's genius, right?
I mean,
because it's like you got to live in the moment. Don't think about the future. Don't think about the past. Like literally every. I don't know. I just thought it was.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to create a Buddhist calendar, and I'm going to sell billions of them. And it might be my best. It might be my best idea ever.
This might be the last time we actually do the podcast.
Yeah. Actually, you know what I'm going to do is, considering that we're going to be doing some vibe coding.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in the spirit.
Let's get in the Buddhist vibe right now and just spin something right up. So yeah, today for those that are not watching but just listening, we recommend go watch. Find us on YouTube, at the AI Guys podcast. So we're gonna jump into a term that's kind of making some rounds right now called vibe coding, and why businesses and just anyone that's interested in AI should probably start to learn the term. So Rich, if you want, let's kind of dive into a little bit of the overview and just introduce the concept a little bit so people understand what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so I've been developing products and software for most of all my life, pretty much. And if anybody's been a developer or a software developer, even just in the past 5 to 10 years, which is like, when everything just really kind of blew up, when
a huge chunk of what's actually out there.
Yeah, they understand the complexity. In fact, when you build out products, typically you have to pick one layer that you're good at, right? You might be a back-end developer where you're more fluent to building out databases, constructing that, or you might be a middleware layer where you understand how to build out APIs and function calls, and then, or you might be a user experience or UX
front end
designer, right? Front end. So you can imagine when you actually want to build a product, it requires a team now, because it's become so sophisticated. And amongst that, you also have like all of these different expertises when it comes to, how are you building it? What platform are you building for mobile? Are you using React? Are you using Vue? There's all these different choices, right? So you can imagine just multiple languages, different layers. It's a complicated thing, which is why I would say the barrier to entry to building out software is very high. It's only got higher, ironically, over time because it has become more complicated. And
the layers of that cake have gotten more layered. So exactly.
So, if you had an idea and you wanted to build out a mobile app or you wanted to build a software product, you had to have a minimum of $50,000, maybe even $100,000 just to get to what I would consider a relatively robust MVP, minimal viable product.
Yeah.
So that's a barrier where everybody would just that's the non-starter for me because I'm not going to throw that kind of money at the risk of it failing. And also, the best and brightest of development is happening, pretty much is consolidated into some of the biggest companies, right? So it's hard to go out and find a really great development team, much less a developer.
You don't have a lot of Wild West dorm rooms or in Silicon Valley just spinning up cool tech anymore. It's coming from the capital.
And so therefore you have a lot of failure. And so I would argue that probably the last 10, 20 years, one of the primary challenges of any startup, especially in the tech ecosystem, or if it requires software, requires some sort of mobile app, the failure rate is high because it's so hard to get from zero to launch.
Yeah.
You might have a great idea. You might be an expert in your industry, like a doctor or maybe a lawyer or whatever it might be. And you're like, I know this is going to work. I know that every one of my colleagues says if I build this, they're going to buy it. I know the business use cases there. I know there's product market fit. I just can't get my product to market. So the entry into this kind of new world, which is really kind of just arisen over the last 3 to 6 months, is that AI, as we all know, generative AI has become this massive lever that can be used to generate all kinds of things. And of course, one of the biggest components it does is generate code. But to a lot of people, they don't understand what that means, and it started off actually kind of quite tangential to the process. It was like, oh, I've got this AI next to me as I'm coding like I normally would. It's kind of, I can go and toggle over and say, hey, how do I write this piece of code? And then I would cut and paste it in there, and it would actually help me accelerate. And then eventually it got a little bit better, and I could actually have it debug, and say, hey, look at my code. What's wrong with this? And I could cut and paste my code, and it would say, oh, fix this. And I would cut it, paste it back, and it would be like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then over the last few months, we started seeing the rise of what's now be called vibe coding, which is there's 4 or 5 tools that came out of, thin air to some degree that are leveraging these same models that we were using and toggling back and forth to help us code over the last year and a half. And they basically took the shot and said, hey, what if we just created an interface where it was all prompting, where the primary interface isn't the development environment, isn't the tool that the developer is using to code, and AI is kind of acting as a co-pilot, but flip the script and basically say, hey, you know what? I'm going to create a way that you could just prompt and develop software like you would talk to a developer. Say, I'm going to, hey, build this product or make it look like this or do whatever.
Yeah.
And so this is what's called now vibe coding, where it's really just kind of like stream of consciousness, start building products. And so this is big for like 3 reasons. One, as I mentioned, it completely eliminates the go-to-market cost and risk. You could build a prototype without having very little development experience. Now, I would say that it probably helps to have some development experience, because when you are prompting this thing, it's good to understand how applications are built and what it means and what a database is. And so you're going to have some of that, or at least have somebody on your team that knows that, but you certainly don't have to have a full-time AI, development team,
right,
working over the clock.
And to your point, really, on that too, like that's where the doctor or the lawyer, somebody in a specific field that maybe isn't tech savvy, could quickly mock up a concept that doesn't need to have the deeper, like you said, database and full stack that kind of goes along with a finished product. But it could be, this is how I'm envisioning it. Okay, now that I have this, can I hand this to a developer and have saved a ton of time, maybe on just UI and UX cost that way?
Exactly. And it also helps, like, even if you did have more of a sophisticated application, right? Because there are some limitations. We're still early days in this vibe coding world, but let's say you did have a very robust application that required much more work and maybe does have to kind of be passed on to a development team to kind of do the fine tuning to connect the things. And there are some areas where that's required, like hooking into other APIs and maybe some more complicated architecture. You're still able to build out a very working prototype at a minimum in a matter of hours, what used to take weeks or months to get to the point where you could show a developer or a team, this is my vision. Because one of the challenges is the person who sees and understands what it looks like in their head, transferring that over to a team. In many cases, that team is also outsourced and overseas, so they're not necessarily in sync with what you want as a
day-to-day vision and everything.
Yeah, and so being able to actually build it, at least the UX even, and the experience of it gets you much further down the road and reduces the risk of a false start or a failed venture.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of new incoming, what I'll call developers, right? If human language is now the default for coding, you basically just unlocked millions and millions of entrepreneurs that basically were unable to execute their idea just because they were not able to get to that minimal viable product, right?
Yeah.
Because that's typically where, if it works and you get your first 20, 30, 40 customers, then you're off and running. But, that's a big step. And number 2, I think what it does is it also creates this completely new way of thinking about designing, developing products from an AI first mentality. And we've talked about this on other episodes, where do you kind of use AI to come into your existing world and try to kind of force fit it and embed it and plug in and see what it can do with your, kind of your legacy, if you will. And this goes not just with product development, but also with your business in general. Or do you kind of say, you know what, I think AI could probably build this from ground up much faster and with a much more stable architecture. And also the fact that AI built it from ground up makes it easier for the AI to expand it, because forcing AI to come into a scenario, I mean, we've all been in these situations, right, where it's a lot,
some of these softwares are like a hoarder's house. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff going on.
yeah. And as a human, we're faced with the same thing. No different. Like, for example, let's say I said, it's a lot different when I say, oh, hey, I want you to design my house, right? Okay. Oh, and I make you go into my house and the house has already got all this crap. And I'm like, hey, I really want to keep all this stuff, but I want you to make it look pretty. And you're like, well, how am I going to do it? Versus coming into a blank wall, you know, in an empty
gutted
house.
The place and now, you know, design it how you see fit. Yeah.
Or if you're a lawyer, it's like, hey, I need you to write my corporate documents, but I already have corporate documents and I want you to use these. And I want you to, you know, and I want you just to make the changes necessary to do this, this, and this. Versus like the, you know, lawyer probably already has a very clean set of corporate documents. So you know, name your use case. You could pretty much make the same argument. And AI is no different, because AI builds off of what it develops much faster because it understands the architecture versus forcing it to embrace what it already exists. And then third, I think what's exciting about vibe coding is that it changes the way that we look at software. And, you know, this kind of correlates with, you know, our belief, which is AI agents and the agentic workforce is a matter of not if, but when, right? Every company is going to reimagine their workforce and augment what they currently have with AI agents first. I mean, you see it in the newspaper all the time. Yesterday, I read an article about a CEO that said, before I hire a human, I want to make sure AI can't do it. And I don't think that's going to be dissimilar to any other approach, because it's a lot cheaper to have AI do that functionality. And also, why not hire? And also the inverse is even more powerful, right? I only want to hire a human that can do things that AI can't do, which is a great way of thinking about how to build a better business, right? Because that means you're looking for those skills. And that's a job that I would want, right? Because you know, I don't want a repetitive job that AI can do. I want a job that actually involves, you know, deep thinking and critical thinking and things like that. So to my point is, when you think about the agentic workforce and the rise of the agentic workforce, and assuming that most of the communication with those agents is going to be through some sort of what I call a human user interface, right? Like what we collectively call HUI, which is like I'm either texting that agent or I'm calling the agent when using voice, or I'm interacting through email or live chat, right? Those are all very language-oriented user interfaces. But there are scenarios where you absolutely need what I would call a traditional software custom UX, right? So like an example would be, let's say I wanted to build out an AI agent that's a sales agent that wants to contact all my legacy leads, right? Like let's say I'm in the real estate world and I've got a database of 1,000 people that are in my sphere, and I want to have AI reach out to them and talk to them, right? I still need some way, an interface for that real estate broker to log in and upload my leads or select what leads I want to send to, maybe even type in a prompt that tells the AI what the messaging should be.
Yeah, provide some background or assets on like what your business is.
And choose a date and time that I want to send this message and hit go. So that user experience that I just described is all that's really required in order to invoke or to trigger that AI agent or multiple agents to go do the job.
Sure.
Right. And today, I mean, we're going to talk about this, you know, in future episodes, but essentially what we're talking about is kind of like a ChatGPT like prompting, but specifically for a business application, because ChatGPT is limited in the sense that it's really just talking to a foundational model. It doesn't have agency to go beyond that. But when we talk about building these custom UXs for these agents, and it could literally be as easy as like a couple of form fills and a go button that triggers out your agent to go do the work, or it could be a prompt that you say, hey, go do this, this, and this, and it triggers out an agentic workflow. Who is going to build those UXs, right? And this is where vibe coding, I think, meets in the middle and really fills in the last missing piece to the whole picture, which is, if you think about the future, we're moving away from these monolithic SaaS products that are like do everything the same for everybody, that we all know and deep in our hearts lack really ultimately
Nuance.
real functionality and lack the ability to really embed AI in a meaningful way because it's so stuck in its way. Whereas we're moving more toward this distribution of very small, like I would call them micro apps, where they're AI powered, meaning like these micro apps are literally just a couple buttons here, a prompt here, a couple select buttons here that the human can then give instruction and build out a prompt that would then be sent to an agentic network or an agent.
Yeah.
And then the agent does the job. And when it's done, it brings back its results, and we're off and running.
Well, you bring up something I want to touch on there too, not to throw you off, but I do agree that there's an appification that's taking place right now on top of an agent, where a year ago, as we were, in this business with Rhea and focusing on like where an agent fits in, like you said, kind of this legacy tech stack, a lot of clients are starting to kind of look at this as, is there some way that I can kind of just create, the cubicle that this agent's going to work out of, and just giving it that housing, that framework from an app perspective, because whether they're going to utilize it and multiple people might need to access that one agent, but to do very deliberate tasks for that one person, or potentially spinning up something like you were talking about in the real estate example, where you might have a client selling that out to a specific industry. Right. And instead of having to say, well, let me spin up 100 agents, 100 AI agents for 100 real estate agents, now I have one platform where we can create a user experience, do the job, and then from there, it just kind of runs on its own iteration. And that's extremely important.
Yeah. I mean, remember, too, we're moving from dumb software to smart software because it's now AI powered. Right. We're moving from AI bringing the language is now the interface to what was, I mean, basically, if you could argue the last 30 years of my life were completely wasted.
I was wondering if you're going to go there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like traditional coders, maybe again, not in your mindset, because you look at the value of just like, holy hell, I just built something that would take me 2 weeks to do, and I did it in an afternoon, at least, from a concept. Yeah, fair. But I feel like a lot of traditional coders are almost, outside just screaming at the sky because they come at it with such skepticism, right? Or like pride in the craft, maybe. Like, what do you feel like is the contention piece there?
Well, I think there's a few problems with culture lag and with adoption. There's it's not about the technology; it's about the humans, fear, uncertainty, doubt, and it's also the apprehension of embracing it. But when you talk about a developer mindset, we've talked about how AI is a multiplier for any person, right? It's not you're not being replaced by AI, you're being replaced by somebody who's using AI. So at a minimum, I think every developer in the back of their minds, because developers are typically early adopters, right? We are developers because we're builders. We want to build things, and you don't build things unless you really embrace the future, right? And so they're conflicted in the sense that, okay, this is really cool. Like, nobody's going to go, oh man, this sucks. I mean,
sure.
They're going to be like, okay, all right, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
The first thing that's going to come to a developer's mind is, oh boy, how do I adjust my value proposition to my clients or to my boss or to wherever?
So I'm not obsolete in a way.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the case at all,
no.
At least in the near term, because a developer mind is still needed. I mentioned this earlier in the episode. It's like, you still need to be able to understand, like, oh, okay, now I want you to create a table that stores this data. But now you're kind of elevating from a low-level developer to now you have the power of a reasonably high-level developer. So there's a cohort of developers that wouldn't be able to code this way anyway. Like, there's a lot of back-end developers that have no idea how to do front-end work. There's a lot of front-end developers that have no idea. So the segmentation of developers is going to benefit no matter how you look at it, because otherwise they can open up. Now they have the ability to really build out full stack. Like, I personally am a full stack developer, so I have the benefit of like understanding the value of understanding, okay, I can build a UI, I can build a middle, and I can go and build databases. But that's very rare these days because we've kind of segmented those roles out. But also, I think what's exciting and also frightening about it is, to my point, is, okay, a lot of the development can move into a new category of developer, meaning like now the marketing team could be a developer, the operations team could be a developer. So the business stakeholder and what I would call the the expert of that, whatever they're an expert in within that business, will actually start to be part of the development cycle, because they can actually prompt the AI to build the UX they want. So this could be good or bad depending on how you embrace it and how you manage it. You know,
Sure.
And it all comes back to like the management of this, because when you think about a corporation, you're thinking about, okay, I'm letting AI permeate through my business. And right now, everybody's using this singular CRM system that I bought, right? Salesforce.com. But what happens if the sales guy can spin up his own basically CRM in a matter of
operating out
hours
of spreadsheets anyways?
because he hates Salesforce?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is the new spreadsheet. That's a great point. This really is the new spread. Why do people love spreadsheets? Because they control as much, and it's easier. But now I can spin up an app and I'm like, oh man, this is way better than Salesforce. I love it. And they start using it. So then you have to start thinking as a company like, well, shoot, I mean, at least they're putting the data in. So now I just need to get that data out.
Yeah.
So people think like there's an interesting point, but like, and this might be a topic for another episode, but the threat may not be from another software company coming in from an AI first mentality and pushing Salesforce out or whatever. Name your SaaS product that is nobody uses and pays a lot of money for. And versus the enemy might be within. You might actually see
the enemy was in the sheets the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might actually see some very smart people that know their industry, know their vertical, build out using vibe coding, just vibing like I do on a Sunday morning, build out something so compelling and sell it within their organization where the adoption and use might tilt the scales to the point where the CIO goes, guys, I mean, if we just put some sophistication around this database and make sure that we have a stable place to put our book of record, we could exit.
You're golden.
Yeah. So this is my point. And I'd love to to end this episode, I think what we should do.
We'll do a vibe code episode 2 on this for sure.
I think we should do I think what we need to do is just so the audience can feel the excitement is let's do some vibe coding. So
the Buddhist calendar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is my new, for our followers out there, this will be live by the end of the day.
We should. I was gonna say, throw it in the Substack, right?
It'll be $19.99 a month.
Yeah.
So what I did here is I'm using Lovable as my vibe code platform of choice here. There's a few others. In fact, one of them that's out there.
Replit is another one that gets out, right?
Replit's not really a vibe coding. Replit's, I mean, it kind of is, but honestly, I think they've fallen behind a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna evolve into it. But I think it doesn't have the same kind of, maybe
it does
it's a
feel
vibe for maybe the older, maybe it has a little bit of both, right? But
it's a vibe for the corporate bro.
Yeah. But there's a few other ones. There's another one that is. I think there's rumors that OpenAI is about to buy them for a couple billion. So, that just shows you that it's real. But let's let me just kind of walk you through how it works, right? So like all I did was put a prompt. I said, hey, build a calendar app that's called the Buddhist calendar, but instead of each day having a month and day number, every day just says today, right? And of course it's in the mindset of the great writings of Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say, for example, and look at what it did, like right off the bat. It has
the eternal present
built
moment,
a UX. I can click on a day. I'm not even sure what's going to happen here because I haven't played around with it. But I can add a little event here.
Right.
Okay, so like right here, add a new event here. So obviously because I don't care about what day it is, everything is today. But let's say I do care about what time it is. So I would just have to come down here and say like, add the ability to include a time
in the event
when I add an event, right?
Yeah.
And so all it is, it's just common logic. But what's really cool is, I'm using English to code, but what's really cool is you'll see it and it'll tell you what it's doing.
Yeah, where it's at in the process.
And obviously you could sit here. I could sit here all day long.
Can you click on that for that drop down there really quick, Rich, just to show?
Yeah. So
for those watching, you can kind of see as he's scrolling down.
It's literally writing the code in front of us.
Exactly,
right
going through it.
Yeah.
Which
So
again, for those that are not dev heavy or have maybe even never really experienced,
honestly,
or
it
tried to
doesn't
learn
matter who
into
you
it.
are unless
Well, that's
you're
what I'm
like,
saying is like when you look at this, that,
yeah,
you know,
you're
for someone who's
impressed.
not from
Yeah.
the tech space goes like, holy shit, it's doing it right now. And
Yeah.
then someone who's in the space goes, holy shit, it's doing it in real
Yeah,
time. So
yeah.
it's the same experience, but there you go.
Correct. Yeah, and it's gonna do a lot of the things. Now, here's really cool. This is really cool. I'm glad it did this. So there's many cases it'll come back with an error, right?
Mhm.
Especially in the early signs. So you're like, oh man, now do I do? Well, you just have to click and try to fix it. So that's it. I mean, it's really, and what's powerful about these models is that they are not only training on code that exists already in the universe,
Yeah.
but it's also being trained every time somebody creates an app inside of this product.
Yeah.
It's training it more and more. So
It's
boom,
crazy,
there you
man.
go. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so
now I have
not only did it break, but then you said, like,
Yep, fix
you know,
it.
fix it, and then it goes, let me go step by step, and this says, hey,
Yep.
actually, I see the issue.
Yep.
And it's pulling that from some repository somewhere,
and that's
then
not
goes
too
from that.
dissimilar to what the experience would be as me a developer. When I develop, I'm over
Yeah.
here coding, and I hit toggle, and I go run, and then I test it, and then there's
If it
an
breaks,
error.
then find it.
I go,
yeah,
and that's all. And AI is no different. It shows how human it is.
yeah,
But what's cool is boom, you know, look, and it creates the whole thing. Literally, would, you know, this would take somebody days, if not, you know, more. And then, you know, we're just kind of messing around and doing it. But what's amazing about this, I hope, and you know, and I can't wait to launch this product, by the way, because it's going to be huge. I think there's a huge community of Buddhists out there that are looking for this.
that need this.
But but I think what's powerful about this, just to summarize, you know, vibe coding, is number one. Honestly, this might be the most powerful element that is going to push adoption up that logarithmic hype cycle and really achieve what I would consider the promise of what the investment made to date. There's a massive amount of development that's going to hit the market in a matter of the next few months, and this is a massive amount of usage and this is going to drive usage of all these foundational models through the roof.
Sure,
because it's much more. So when I go on ChatGPT, great example. If I have an average conversation with ChatGPT, it's probably going to be 1 million tokens. That's 1 million words, right? Like if that's a full, like I'm talking about like a very robust, write me this, do this, read this document at most. And that's not that much usage. When you're talking about building out sophisticated applications, you're in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of tokens. So imagine 100x usage, right? Once this starts to permeate out and people start building what I call mini apps or AI driven apps.
Yeah.
Because you're not building, nobody's going to build out Salesforce using this. Nobody wants to.
Yeah.
But what they want is they want a simple, fun little thing like this. They want to take their idea, spin something up, and see what happens, right? Nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Number two, I think what vibe coding brings to the market is monetization it's going to change the business model of software even more than what we talked about in the past. We talked about how seat licensing is under attack. We talked about how these monolithic SaaS companies are going to start to, you know, their models and their way that they charge are going to start to feel pressure to reduce, especially when they have AI agents running the show. Why do I need all these seat licensing? Why do I need to pay so much money for this basic glorified book of record? Whereas now, you know, there is no seat licensing here. You know, there is no, now the user, and it could be that you build an app literally just for your internal usage. It's not something you necessarily have to take it out to market. So for all intents and purposes, outside of the cost of building this, it's free, right? There's some hosting costs and things like that, but it's minimal, right? So now you really unlock this concept of like the cost of application development is approaching zero, and the cost of running and operating applications is approaching zero. And what does that unlock from how businesses can look at the future? And the number three, which is the obvious thing in statement, is this is just really fun. Like it's really fun for somebody to be a creative and to give them the power,
not feeling held back by anything
of software development.
Yeah.
It's like, it's literally like somebody just introduced me to the pencil. If I was like, if I was a guy that was chiseling caves or something,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's like, holy moly, I can unlock so much. If I'm a creative and I'm a UX guy and I just have this vision for an application for something cool, and or a business owner that has no technical background, but I have this idea of something
You have
cool.
A problem you know that you want to solve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And
that's so cool.
And what's cool even, and I'll just give one last shout to, and if Lovable, if you're watching, feel free to, send us a shirt. But like you can also, there's a community now. So like when you actually,
I saw that. That's pretty cool.
When you go into this, it's not just you, but you're creating, there's all these different apps that are being created, and there's a community of apps, right? That now you can actually go in and remix. So it's like TikTok. So imagine like, on TikTok, you see a dance move like I typically do, because everybody knows that I'm a huge TikTok dance guy. And I go in and I remix a video off TikTok and I make it my own. But now we've advanced that mentality, that social behavior into like, look, you can literally, like, you could have your 3-year-old draw something and then have AI generate. I mean, all the possibilities are just, it's ridiculous. And these are apps that are being built inside of Lovable, right? Creating motion. I can create an image and make an animated GIF. So you can literally come in here. So think about all the different things that this is going to affect, from an education, from a creator. This is a huge unlock. It's not just a thing about development. This is a thing about the creativity of basically the human race evolving. And there's really not one single person that's not going to be a developer. And the next generation of humans is every single person that is born today, or maybe even 10 years ago, is now is on social media posting, just like how the everybody became a news outlet, a blogger. Everybody, if you have a Twitter handle, or now that you're an influencer, or you're some sort of information source, we're evolving now into every single person that's alive today will become a creator and a developer and a builder of something that however they see the world, or however they want to extend their talent. And that's extraordinarily exciting. And I think if that isn't what AI was meant to do, you know what I mean? As we've talked about, like unlocking that time back to people. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. Yeah. I mean, the fact that I could build a Buddhist calendar in a matter of seconds just shows you that the cure for cancer is it's right around the corner. Days away. Yeah. Days away. Well, for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone. Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. On the mind.